Welcome back. It is the Rebound Series. I thank you for staying with us. Douglas Munatsi, Chief Executive Officer of ZIDA, the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, is my guest. Unfortunately, though, it's great to say investors, we've got these resources or here are the opportunities, but they're coming into a country that has limited supply of power. There are the challenges, the infrastructure that is not what it was in the past and, compared to other countries. How do you mitigate those challenges that are very real for a country like Zimbabwe?
That is very true. Obviously, part of the issue is that we need, as a country, to improve the ease of doing business. And the ease of doing business, if you look at the World Bank, criteria on how they rank countries, we've improved from a ranking of about in high 70 or 170 something to about 140.
140, yeah.
And our plan is to continue to improve. The highest ranked African countries, are in the 70s and 80s, and that's where we want to be. There is definitely, an imperative for us to really focus on how do we improve. And when you unpack what the ease of doing business is, it includes all these issues that you talked about before. How long does it take to register a company? How are taxes collected? How do we deal with issues of respect to property rights? How do we transit? How does the country accommodate the trading across borders and things like that? So there are areas where we have improved very significantly, and one of the major focus areas for ZIDA is to really work on that, to get us to improve and go up the ranks. It is also, by implication, actually sets the country in a position of how competitive are we. Compared to Mauritius, it's the highest ranked African country. Compared to Rwanda, which is one of the top ones, compared to Botswana, compared to our neighbors within SADC. We are not even in the top 5 within SADC. So the effort, the heavy lifting is indeed quite significant. But we are determined. I think you can even see that even within government, the institutions of government are geared to accommodate and to deliver on the ease of doing business. There are things that in the short term we can't change. As you correctly pointed out, infrastructure, as we have underinvested infrastructure, not just for 1 year or 5 years, for over 20 to 30 years. And therefore you can't correct that overnight. But I think the government is clearly sees with what needs to be done, and we play a role in advising government as to if we do such and such, we will improve on the investment environment. But even beyond that, bear in mind also that if you talk about power, yes, we do have a power deficit. But it is not just Zimbabwe, right? Yep. You know that SADC itself has got a negative power position. But I can tell you now that renewable energy projects that we are looking at and considering, and some of which we have already approved, are quite significant. If we all follow through on the number of projects that are there, I mean, you remember that sometime last year, the president toured all the energy coal-based projects in Hwange. There is, likely to be quite a significant improvement in that space. But it's also, true that we need to increase investment in renewable energy, not just in the traditional power sources. And the challenges that we are seeing at Kariba also speak to us, improving on renewable energy. And government's position on independent power operators is very positive. So if you've got a power idea, any idea to improve on renewable energies, we are more than happy to consider, and we are considering quite a number of projects in that space.
Let me come back to a point you made earlier, that part of the mandate that you're also given by the president is to kill corruption. We are dealing with individuals, we're dealing with people who have entrenched, ways of doing business, cultures, personal interests How easy has it been to, or let me ask you, how far you've gone in terms of that killing mission?
Well, look, what I can say is that at least the investors comes to Zida and they are dealing with Zida alone, and they don't need to know what is happening in the back office. As I indicated to you earlier, if you come in, you want to register a company, you come to us, and we will do all those all the back office for you. And so all these things, traditionally or historically or in the past, were areas where investors got frustrated, and they don't need to. Now they just need to come to us. Literally, and I know that a lot of people find it difficult to process, to say, all I need to do is to come to Zida. And it is as simple as that, that you come to us, we will do the coordination with all government departments, all of them, where you need to get a license, where you need to get a permit, you need to get any approval for anything. So there is no need for you to use anybody. In fact, the interesting thing is that I had a lawyer from one of the law firms to say, "Oh, so are you saying that you are, you are eliminating me?" I said, "Well, some of your roles were necessitated by an environment which rewarded hustling.
Yes,
but that is not necessarily the way it should be. It is as simple as, in fact, if you think about an investor sending us all their documents, in the form and in the nature that we require, that they don't even need to come to our offices physically. We will register their companies from wherever they are. Obviously, we'll do the usual KYC, getting to understand the client and making sure that we abide by internationally accepted standards. But there is absolutely no need for you to go to anybody else. We are your interaction, we are your meeting point, and also we also assist most of these clients after the investment has been approved. We have given them a license. We do have a bit of our business which is called aftercare. If you need a work permit for if your business requires you to import some skills or specialists and so forth, we'll do all those things for you.
You also mentioned, when we were speaking earlier, that there's a significant number of renewable energy projects amongst others. That takes me back to, and perhaps this is prior to the formation of Zida, but I think also a very important thing, a couple of years ago, and certainly at the beginning of in the early stages of the Second Republic, we got the impression, and there were newspaper headlines to suggest that investors were stampeding at our door, mega deals upon mega deals were signed. Very few, if any, have actually moved on and come to fruition. Where's the bottleneck? Now that you're in the system, have you followed through on some of those projects, and is there a bottleneck somewhere?
Yes, some of them may happen, some of them may not happen. That's I'm just being very truthful about some of those deals which were announced in the early part of the new republic. I think we've also agreed with my counterparts in government, so let's say in the Ministry of Mines or in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce or in transport and infrastructure, that there are certain due diligence requirements that we will do. So somebody coming in and saying, well, I want to put up a power station and whatever, we will welcome them, but we also want to see the color of their money. So in the past, that bit on the due diligence was not as diligent as it should have been. So for example, we are formulating processes with my colleagues in the Ministry of Mines, for example, that somebody says, okay, I want to build a mine let's say in one of the strategic areas like diamonds and platinum and so forth, which are very high profile. We say fine. We'll give you the licenses, we'll give you all the approvals that you need, but we need timelines.
Yeah.
By what time are you going to be doing, are you going to, if you're doing some exploration or if you're doing whatever, what is the timeline? And we also want to see some guarantee that you actually have the money. Indeed. And so we are doing that now across all the projects. And I have, as long as under my watch, I will not invite the president to come and preside over something that I think may not have a very good chance of success. So our culture, because remember that ZEDA is actually directly responsible, the president is directly responsible for ZEDA in terms of the act. So we have taken a deliberate approach that we only want to bother the president with real projects, with things that are going to happen. And so when you generally see us making those kinds of announcements, we've done some thorough work. Doesn't mean to say that something something could go wrong, but in terms of projects in the normal course of business, we will not license somebody that we are not confident they've got the capacity to actually implement their projects.
Very interesting point there. I mean, I had made notes about this because some of the sentiment or comments I hear from people, and I'll give a very direct example is, a few years back on assignment, I went to Zisco Steel, and I think at the time there were some Chinese investors that were planning to revive it. And I remember meeting the former chairman of the Workers' Committee, who sadly now is a vendor because of what's happened there. And he said to me, to quote him directly, he said, "You know what, kumutsa chinichi, I'm a German." So it gives a sort of impression that as Zimbabweans, for whatever reason, I think because of where we're coming from, we expect investors from a certain part of the world, a certain geographical region. Yet, perhaps in recent times, we've been seeing some that don't meet or fit that bill.
Yeah.
Managing expectations.
Yeah. I can tell you that the issue, one of my biggest jobs is to manage expectations, because those who understand the Second Republic's ambitions, the president's ambitions on ZEDA, because it's common cause that the president has openly said that in the early stages of his term, he was advised by some people to go to Rwanda. He went to Rwanda, met with President Kagame, and in the end, President Kagame agreed to send his, my opposite number in Rwanda, and she came here, Claire. I think everybody knows her, and she addressed cabinet. She addressed a number of civil servants and so forth. And so the ambition is driven by we can do better. And when we launched ZEDA on the 17th of December last year, the president jokingly said, "I hope that you are going to become the student who will do better than the teacher." So that's the ambition. So it is really us being very deliberate, very ambitious, and also clearly advising the world that as the president said, we're open for business. It's not just a line, but again, we have to prove it we have to walk the talk.
Indeed.
But to your point, the issues to do with, the world has changed.
Yeah.
I know that people think, the best technology is German, but the reality is that many countries have now risen to become big players in global business. Let me just give you an example. I was saying to somebody that those of our generation would know that we had a company here called WRS, which used to make TVs and radios, and Supersonic, and these companies at that time were at the same level as Samsung and LG and so forth. We just never had a vision which allowed us to say, wow, we can actually deliberately leapfrog this business or grow this business to become a global business.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't follow that only the Germans will deliver in certain areas. But of course, there are countries which have got a competitive advantage in some areas, but you can't confine that to a geographical area.
Indeed. Let me stop you there, only because we need to take a short break. The Rebound series will continue shortly. Stay tuned. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound Series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. It's the Rebound Series. I thank you for staying with us. I want to continue my discussion with the CEO of Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, Mr. Munatsi. Obviously, as we ended that last segment, you're talking about the fact that the world has changed and we're looking for investors from everywhere. We want to tell Zimbabwe that the world that Zimbabwe is open for business. It's disputed, it's debatable. People will argue about this and the effects, but I think it's undoubted that the sanctions on Zimbabwe have had an impact, an adverse impact. How does that affect you? And how do you intend to get around that? Because it is a fact that it restricts who can do business with us.
Yes, I'm not going to get into the political debate about that, but what I can tell you as a banker is that back in the day, before the turn of the century, in the late 90s and early 2000s, we used to have lines of credit, which we used to, we make banks compete amongst themselves to offer us a line, for us to draw down on lines. But that has changed totally. That also changed post 2008. So there are a lot of things that have changed. But I can say that, you see, the issue is that on the first instance, our initial strategy is to respond to investors. So it's a responsive is the part where we facilitate, because an investor has either electronically or physically walked through our doors to say, I need a license, I need to start my business here, and I'm told I need a zero license. So that is us responding. And I think there's a lot in that space. I mean, just judging by how busy my staff are, there's a lot that we are dealing with, just responding to investors in all different areas. So that is one. The other part is that, remember that particularly in a case like ourselves, where resources are limited, we have to rely on partnership with the private sector, which is where the PPP part comes into play. And I think there's a huge potential in that space, not just to deal with the issues on our road infrastructure, rail as well, water, electricity, and all sorts. So those areas are areas where I can tell you that even local investment, domestic investment it would actually come in quite handy.
Is there capacity for that?
Of course. I mean, you know that government is proud of the partnership it has with domestic contractors in redoing the Bide Bridge Chirundu Road. And there are a lot of other areas where we are looking to see how we can partner. The issue in the past was that that was never transparent. It was never encouraged. Yep. We signed a road contract with a foreign guy who we didn't even know whether they had the capacity to do the road. We launched the road and pressed the button, come and build the road, and the guy, they didn't have the capacity. So yeah. I think there's a lot that domestically we can do, and I'm convinced, by the way, that we can reset the WRS and all the other industries that have died with domestic, capacity, because it has been proven. Yes, in the banking sector, in all other sectors, that we actually have capacity for some of these areas to be driven successfully by domestic skills. In fact, to your earlier point, when we asked our brand consultants to advise us on how we had to build our brand and so on and so forth, you are correct that the overwhelming narrative online and everywhere is that Zimbabwe is a negative place for FDI and DDI. But what was interesting, because in this particular case it was actually a foreign consultant, what was interesting is that they said, the one silver lining about Zimbabwe, the one amazing part about this country is your brain trust. you've got amazing people, both at home and in the diaspora. So we believe that there is an opportunity for us to actually encourage our brain trusts to come home, whether they physically come home or from wherever they are, to participate in this process of rebuilding this country, which is what your program is about, right?
Sure.
To reset, to really bring the skills they've built over the years, wherever they are, whether it's in medicine, engineering, or whatever, to really come and participate in the process of, and I think in that process we could also leapfrog our economy, because we don't have to really, follow this, path that other economies followed, because we have the advantage of having the brain trust, which is now operating at a very, very at the top end of the world economy. So I'm convinced that we can, with the right framework, we can actually get ourselves to, rebuild this economy in a very fundamental way.
What has prevented them from doing it in the past, and what has changed to make them want to come back and rebuild now?
Do you know, it is anything from people just not knowing that there are opportunities at home. Sometimes the policy is not very favorable. Sometimes the perception, as I advised you earlier, that this friend of mine who called me is a top lawyer in town, or why am I, my client is frustrated that, they can't have, they've been trying to register their company. I said, but my friend, you talk to me every day. Come to me. I'm the one who can do that for you if you're an investor. So some of it is just lack of knowledge. And of course, I have to say, and I know this is probably controversial, in general, there is an unhealthy negative energy that prevails in general, particularly people at home and abroad. But mostly there's a certain generation of negativity. I mean, maybe justified. We can debate that, but interestingly, the number of investors, I have investors, for example, where they come here, they're looking at a particular project. I've got one particular investor I can mention. They want to build a gold mine adjacent to the Zims mine in Renko, in Masvingo. They're going to put about 100 million plus, but he has since come back with another 3 or 4 projects, because he says, I can't believe the opportunities that are here. So some people, while we are going on a negative trajectory, there are people who see opportunities galore everywhere. I mean, he was telling me the other day that, by the way, I found a site in Victoria Falls. I've been, granted this site. It's an amazing place. Even showed me pictures. I'm going to build a lodge, a 5-star lodge in Victoria Falls. In the meantime, back at home, we are complaining. So you see, it's a combination sometimes of all those factors. True. But I'm hoping that one of the things that we are going to do as ZEDA, and our ambassador in South Africa has already requested that we should start there, because obviously it has got our largest number of diasporans, is to interact with the diaspora, to talk about opportunities. I also have to tell you that I think maybe there's also a delayed effect, because, and you might be able to confirm for me as well, that the number of the level of interest that I'm seeing by young people in agriculture, for example, it's incredible. Everybody now wants a piece of land. They want to do something.
True.
And so that was never the case before. And so I think the process of us advising our population, our citizens, both at home and abroad, and the international community at large, that there are investment opportunities in this country is it's a job for all of us to do.
Indeed, to dispel the myth, I think the biggest thing is people believe that you need to have proximity to the elite or the ruling elite in order to get these opportunities. So.
Not at all.
Zida comes at a time that Zimbabwe is also pushing the devolution agenda. How will that work? Because what we are told, and perhaps this is an opportunity for you to shed more light on it, is that all 10 provinces must be competing for investors and create opportunities there. How practical is that? How does Zida fit into all this?
So I have to admit that before I joined Zida, devolution to me sounded like a political line that politicians like to talk about and so on and so forth. But it is real. In the sense that we are right in the middle of it. In that you were I think you were there when the Minister of Finance delivered the provincial GDP figures and the GDP per capita and so forth. And at one of the meetings that we had, we participated in a ZIDA with the provincial ministers. It's very interesting to hear them say, "Oh, I didn't realize my economy was so small, the provincial economy, because what Zims has been able to do, which the minister, Professor Mtuli was able to expound on, is the regional economic data, which tells you what your economic, the regional economy is, and what it is per capita." And so now that has opened the eyes of those provincial ministers to say, the smallest economy, believe it or not, per capita is Manicaland, with the largest obviously being Harare. And so now the issue is, if we are aiming to be an upper middle income economy by 2030, it means that our national per capita income must be $4,000 per $4,000, which means that if you are, as Manicaland is around the 700 per capita, you need to move it to 4,000. Yeah. So, and you then look at, so our role as ZIDA is to assist what are called the provincial development coordinators.
So give us some practical examples of how a particular province could harness its resources.
Okay, so we got 10 provinces. If you look at, for example, the idea of harnessing the resources that are in the province and really look at it in a more focused way. I think that's the whole point, not to say that the province must necessarily unhealthily compete against each other. No. The idea is to focus. As I said before, the Masvingo is supposed to be the most dammed province. What are we doing to use the water, those water bodies, in supporting agriculture, in supporting maybe some mini hydro, electric, plants and so forth. So, and then you look at a province like Matabeleland North, which houses our most prime tourist asset, but also has substantial, coal deposits. How should we help them to think about attracting investment and interacting? Because the idea that sometimes an investor goes to a province and they receive a hostile reception because people have got other ideas for themselves or for others. So all those things now hopefully will fall away, because now a province focuses on really unlocking the potential that each province has got. And so we find it very healthy. So our role is to assist with not only the issue of how an investor is looked after on the ground, because we approve investments, we license, but on the ground, if people are hostile or if people are not understanding the role that that particular investment plays, it becomes a problem. So our role is to really assist with the process of analysis, looking at how to unlock value in each province, where the most most focus should be. If, for example, a province has got a lot of land, let's say Mashonaland and Central, are they really utilizing that land to best potential? So those kinds of things are now focuses everybody And I think this is, again, an area that a lot of people do not appreciate. That devolution should, and if we do it right, will allow for people to really look at, we are sitting on this resource, but we have actually not unlocked it.
In the past, Zimbabwe has been, or government has been faulted for going into deals that end up being bad or not beneficial for the country. I think a term that was often used in the past was, we're not boxing smart enough when we go for these investments. So in a bid to try and sell ourselves, in a bid to try and attract all this investment, how do we ensure that we're not giving away too much, too many concessions?
Yeah, I'm glad to say that in that particular space, I think we are doing quite well. We are adding a lot of value because there is no government there is no joint venture between the private sector or between foreign investors, domestic investors, and a government entity that does not come through ZEDA, goes through a committee of permanent secretaries chaired by the permanent secretary for finance, and then goes all the way to cabinet, not having gone through the rigor of analysis. Mm-hmm. So all those things we do, and fortunately, we've been lucky enough to attract some of the best skills Zimbabwe has produced. And in that way, we actually operate pretty much, which also what the president asked me to do. You must operate like a proper private sector entity, and we do. So, as I said earlier on, I mean, our due diligence process, the process when we interrogate investors' ideas. Obviously, if you're putting money, it's none of our business. If that business is going to fail or not. But we have to subject most of those projects to proper analysis, asking if your IRR is so low, why is it that you want to do this project? Mm-hmm. How is the project financed? But so we don't really interfere with the investors' prerogatives, but we do question, because some things may not make sense at face value, and therefore we subject them to really thorough analysis.
And in terms of incentives, that we don't we are not too generous.
No, I mean, obviously, we must also be very mindful of the fact that we are competing for capital. So at the end of the day, we look at ourselves, we compare ourselves with, let's say, for example, in platinum. Mm-hmm. Platinum, the largest platinum depositor in Zimbabwe and South Africa. Mm-hmm. So if you are going to compete for capital, you need to provide the incentives that make you very competitive. Mm-hmm. Gold, we are looking at gold, and we are debating the issues and how best can we increase investment in gold. We have to look at ourselves and compete with Tanzania, Mali, and Ghana, South Africa. These are the countries where these are the dominant producers of gold in Africa, and we benchmark ourselves against all those countries. What incentives they provide, how do they treat investors, and so on and so on and so forth. So we in every step of the way we have to benchmark ourselves. You may perceive that it's too generous, but sometimes you have to look at the totality of what an investment is going to do. It's not just are we looking at exports? We're looking at employment. Are we looking at we look at, our analysis looks at all those things. Okay. And at the end of the day, we never give away too much than what our next door neighbor is providing. But we have to be competitive enough to make our value proposition the value proposition for an investment to favor us, because that's the reality.
Earlier you spoke about WRS, you used the WRS example, and how that could have been, a potentially, top brand comparable at that time. It now brings me to the question I want to, as we wrap up. The African Continental Free Trade Area is obviously the big buzz now, and on paper seems like a big opportunity for the whole of Africa, for Zimbabwe, but specifically in terms of Zimbabwe, how do we ensure? Because my own personal worry or concern is that it will end up being the biggest industrialized economies, a big bonanza for them because now they can freely sell to everyone else. What does Zimbabwe do to benefit from this?
Again, we have to look at what our competitive advantage is and our competitive advantages. So you look at, we are landlocked. So I didn't know this until one investor said to me, we like this country, we like a lot of things about you, but you are logistically an expensive place to operate from. Mm-hmm. And, pin dropped, ding. I said, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. But I think because sometimes we overestimate our competitiveness.
And in a classic example, for years we've always been told we sit at the heart of SADC, and so we're strategic. But things don't happen just because you are there.
No, exactly. Things don't happen just because you're there. But there are things that we can do. For example, right now there's debate, and we are talking to investors who are saying, if they bring petroleum products to Zimbabwe, it's easier to distribute that to the rest of the region, as far as DRC, Zambia, Malawi, and so forth. So those things are real. If we could, improve our railways, for example, we are talking to an investor who has been, whetting our appetite with the potential that they could set up a huge steel mill here in Zimbabwe. In fact, we are talking to two. And if that happens, all of a sudden, because we've got significant iron ore deposits, right now China imports most of its iron ore from Australia, from Brazil, from South Africa, from Sierra Leone, and so forth. And we could be one of the players in that space. So we are in discussions with them. But it's one of those discussions as well where they are saying, well, you're going to have to give us some incentives because logistically you are expensive. Mm-hmm. How do we deal with the fact that Beira cannot contain our exports if we are going to be able to do? So do we divert some of that to Maputo? Do we divert some of that to Windhoek? Yeah. To Walvis Bay? So all those things come into play. But yes, it is true that strategically we are well positioned. And we are well positioned for the African continent. But you also need to think about a whole lot of things. Where is the population? Mm-hmm. So the top most populated countries, obviously, as you know, Nigeria, Egypt, mm-hmm. Ethiopia, DRC. Mm-hmm. Those are the most populated countries. So how do you get your products to those markets? What is the smartest way to do it? And what kind of products should you do? Yeah. As you say, going back to the WS example, you know that during our time when we were young and would run around the industrial areas, Colgate-Palmolive used to be here. Mm-hmm. Johnson & Johnson was here. Mm-hmm. Lever Brothers was here. And now they are just distributing their products here. Yet they used to manufacture out of here. So how do we reset and make ourselves to be a compelling case for manufacturing for the rest of Africa? So that is really where our game is going to be. That is also part of what I said to you before, that Zida is both, we are reactive, we are reacting to investors coming to this country, but there must come a time when we actually lead the mm-hmm. ideas. What is it that we should be doing? Yep. In the PPP space? We should not only respond because somebody has come in and say, I can fix, NRZ, I can fix Zimbabwe. We should actually have our own ideas, well thought through, where we'll say, this is how we're going to provide service. What should we be doing about a whole lot of other things, like Singapore? Singapore has decided that in some cases they will be the center of, AI, for example, yeah. Center of, some industries which are futuristic. Mm-hmm. And they actually led that process. So when they go around the world, they say, you can come and set up your industry here. So that is really where our game should go. What is it that we can actually offer to investors competitively and make a compelling case and make a case that ordinary investors would find compelling.
Thank you so much. I think as a parting shot, and the final thing which I think is the most important, not most important, but is critical to all you're doing here is the point you made earlier. the need to stamp out the commissions, the my cut, what's in it for me? Because I think that is the big cancer. Increases the cost of doing business, and will scare away some of these investors. We'll put them off.
That is very true, and I can unequivocally tell you that that is definitely that won't happen under my watch. Certainly, it is very clearly one of the very important issues that the president said to me. If you are successful, we will not have people charging commissions for project approvals, for their ideas to be implemented in this country. And we are doing exactly that. I mean, there is no one who should feel that they need to go to a minister or a government official to get their project approved. If the project meets all our criteria, all you need to do is to come to ZEDA. This is where it begins and ends. And we will hold your hand long after you have spent your money to change our country.
Indeed, and we will hold you to some of those things that you've unequivocally declared here.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Douglas, for being a fantastic guest and for joining us here on the Rebound Series. Douglas Munatsi, Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, I do thank you. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound Series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Thank you for staying with us on the Rebound Series. Now, we thought we'd get some insight from players who are directly involved in analyzing Zimbabwe as an investment destination, those who are looking at the financial sectors, the equity markets. And so I'm now joined by the head of research for Morgan & Co., Mr. Batanai Matsika. Batanai, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to come through.
Indeed. Now, what is clear is that Zimbabwe is not getting enough FDI. There are efforts to try and bring it in. One of the ways that I think, Treasury officials are trying to do that is to tap into the equity markets. And so we saw last year, amidst much pomp and fanfare, the launch of the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange.
Exactly.
Not as active as many people would have wanted it to be. Could that be an indication that perhaps Zimbabwe is not yet ready for a market like this, or that it's just not attractive?
I think it's early days to actually put in conclusion to say that we're not ready or anything like that. But it's also worth noting that it was launched during the COVID-19, and when you're just looking at global flows of investment right across the world, it appears that developed markets are looking quite attractive. So there's been a lot of action in frontier markets such as Zimbabwe. But definitely, I think it was a step in the right direction, because what you need is to then tap into portfolio investments that can then translate to FDI flows as well.
You mentioned COVID-19, the fact that frontier markets such as us are not, as attractive or enticing at this point in time. Post-COVID, can we expect that there will be a rebound?
Yes, post-COVID, what's happening, especially when you're looking at global sentiment, is really hinged around the pace of vaccination programs. And you'll find that, they're quite rapid in developed countries, USA, Europe, and the like. But also another edge that, developed markets have is that, there's been some significant stimulus packages. They've got a lot of fiscal space in terms of support that they can put out there. So in terms of growth projections, I think for sub-Saharan Africa, we're looking at growth of about below 4%. It's roughly around 3% about. But when you then compare that to emerging markets and also some developed markets, it's below that. So it shows you that probably 2021, we won't see a lot of inflows coming in. Probably late 2022, that's when we should expect things to normalize and interest to come back to the frontier markets.
Now, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the main, proposition, the selling point of that market is the fact that it's dollar denominated, and so there are no issues to do with currency. We often hear that investors who want to invest in Zimbabwe have an issue with our currency. We are told by authorities that there have been currency reforms. We have the Zimbabwe dollar, which is holding its own on the auction market. But from what you are hearing, is there an issue with the currency?
Yes, there's been issues with the currency, especially in yesteryears, because what you want is stabilization by the end of the day. I think there are a lot of investors that invest in Nigeria, Kenya, and things like that. So you find that the exchange rate could be, probably above 100, but what they like is just the stability. So you want to be able to plan and to manage foreign exchange risk, which is why the VFX is a very good proposition, because it takes away one of the major risks that investors look at, which is foreign exchange risk. But of course, with the efforts around the auction system, if we then are able to stabilize the rate so that volatility is not that high, definitely investors should be able to even participate on the ZSE. But definitely, VFX is very good for managing foreign exchange risk.
Is the currency stable, the Zimbabwe dollar?
What we've seen is that over the past couple of months, even if you're looking at the parallel market developments, we find that it is sort of stabilized around 120, 125. But of course, investors always are forward-looking to say that is it sustainable by the end of the day, because what has sort of helped the exchange rate has been issues to do with money supply, a lot of restrictions even on mobile money, and also the suspension of fungibility on dual listed stocks and the like. So the question is, how long can the taps remain closed in terms of liquidity, given that, of course, we need to fuel the economy in terms of capital injections, but also the issues around aggregate demand. So there's a lot of risks or uncertainties that also come into play to say that how long will this play out in terms of stability.
You've just mentioned a topic I was going to get into when you spoke about suspension of fungibility of dually listed stock exchanges, the issues that we saw happening to mobile money, amongst other things. Do you think those sort of moves give the right sort of tone and message to investors? Do you think it gives them confidence? Will they come to a market where just overnight markets can be closed? Most recently, we've heard the president say that there are sharks in the financial services sector. Who knows what action is to follow? Is that the environment that will attract FDI?
I think, of course, certain moves obviously they put a dent in terms of the message that you're trying to put out there. But what I always try to communicate is to say that it's important then to be effective in terms of the communication that you then put out, to say why are you suspending that, and also involve all stakeholders, because the moment you do not communicate that, definitely it puts a dent in terms of interest amongst investors generally. Yeah.
Okay, so the communication has been effective.
Communication has to be effective in terms of just managing the image out there, to say what's the reason behind the policy, how sustainable is it? Is it for the entire market, or is just set to benefit certain individuals?
Certainly, I think someone who's trying to communicate effectively. Earlier, I was speaking to the Chief Executive Officer of Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency. Again, another entity, a lot of pomp and fanfare surrounding it. How easy is the job of that agency, do you think?
I think it's a tall order, in the sense that when you're targeting FDI flows, you also have to put yourself in the shoes of the investor themselves, to say that if they look at Zimbabwe, what are they seeing? What are the risks that they're trying to mitigate, so that they can get a return on the investment? There are a number of risks. We talk of issues around political risk, talk of repatriation risk, consumer sentiment risk, and the like. So there are a lot of areas that you have to look at to say that how can we mitigate each risk. For example, we're talking about the VFX, and one concern that has come up is to say that there's a lot of repatriation risk around capital gains, dividends, and things like that, which also talks to the foreign currency situation in Zimbabwe. So really, it's something that is broad-based. If you're then going out to market Zimbabwe there, you have to consider all policies, the fiscal front, the monetary policy, things such as the ease of doing business and things like that. So there are a lot of moving parts that you have to deal with when you're trying to attract FDI flow.
What would be your, top priorities if you were to say to the authorities, look, fix these top 3 things in order to attract, in order to make the investors comfortable? What would they be?
Okay, I think an overhanging risk when it comes to FDI has to do with political risk, given, of course, what has happened in yesteryears, instabilities and things like that, issues to do with economic sanctions. But then when you're looking at political risk, it's very difficult then to do anything, especially in the short to medium term. So what you can then build is a conducive environment through your policies. You manage issues to do with just the economic risks around foreign exchange, interest rates, inflation and things like that. So it's really about policy measures that then support a conducive environment, but also looking at the ease of doing business in terms of, the administration that comes with, setting up a business in Zimbabwe and things like that. Yeah.
You spoke earlier about growth in sub-Saharan Africa and the projections there. We've been told that, 7.4% growth this year. Is the minister detached from reality? Do you see the same sort of figures? And if we were to ask the average Zimbabwean on the streets, do they feel that the economy will be better or will grow at the end of this year, given the hardships they're going through now?
Yes, I think from where we're coming from, especially around COVID-19, the droughts and things like that, we are coming from a very low base. So some of the figures that you also then see are also a result of a low base effect, to say that, we're quite on the low side. But there are a lot of outcomes, if you are going to look at the Zim economy, that could play out in 2021, and that could surprise. So there are outcomes such as, the bumper harvest. I think, we're looking at 2.8 million tons. Issues to do with the tobacco output. I think the projection now is around 200 million kgs and the like. Issues to do with gold prices. If there are geopolitical risks, the current prices will be sustained. So those outcomes could definitely surprise, and the growth definitely would come into play. But we feel that 7.4% is better on the high side, because we also see structural issues within the economy. There's need for funding in certain areas before we actually benefit from growth in certain sectors. So we are projecting roughly 3.4% in terms of GDP growth in 2021.
Do you think, the issue of structural reform, structural changes, that has been spoken about several times and for a very long time. Are you happy with the pace at which that is happening?
I think a limitation that we've seen with some of the policies that are being put in place, you find that a lot of discussions to grow the economy are hinged around boosting productivity. And, I've been in a lot of these webinars. That's the tone. That is the song that's being sung, to say that we need to boost productivity in certain sectors of the economy. But when you're looking at productivity, you have a lot of factors that you have to put in there, and one of them is capital, and which is why, of course, we're discussing the issues around FDI, to say that are we getting enough support? Are we getting enough partners to come in and set up shop and actually put in the money? Yes, we have the labor, which is great. We have technology in certain areas, but we also need external players to come in and also put in the technology as well. So really, the efforts should be around how do we get access to the capital, because if you then consider our capital markets in Zimbabwe, you'll be quite limited in terms of the credit markets, whether a company can come in and just issue a bond. We don't have the capacity. So really there's need to look elsewhere, and the only place would be FDI flows. It would definitely make sense to grow your FDI flows.
And so let me put it to you now, as we wrap up. We don't have the capacity, from what you're saying, domestically to be able to mobilize the resources we need. Yet we want to bolster productivity.
Yeah.
We have a burden around us, which is hanging, which is the political issues, the sanctions, which will make it very difficult for us to outcompete, other players in the region who have the same resources that we have. Are you optimistic, therefore? And if we fail to raise this FDI, then what? What is the plan? What is the way forward?
Okay, there's been a lot of talk to say that we can also harness domestic investors and try and mobilize resources from that end. But another area that I feel that we can also look into is just the diasporan community by the end of the day. Because with FDI or investment in general, you're basically looking at ways by which you can grow businesses, people can come and set up. So it's really about working around incentives to say that, our brothers that are out there, how can they channel funds and, invest in some of the projects that we have here.
Do they have the resources?
Yes, they do have, considering that in certain places where they are right now, there's been a lot of support, like I indicated, stimulus packages and things like that. They could have a surplus that could be channeled towards strategic projects within Zimbabwe.
Indeed, and I know that, again, it's one of those things, almost like a broken record with Zimbabwe, that has been spoken about diaspora policy, but not much action on the ground. It's the implementation.
Exactly. It's really about implementation. I'll give you an example of what has been playing out in the mining sector. I think there's been a lot of news, discoveries around oil, lithium, and there are a lot of global trends that are pointing to the growth of the EVs, electric vehicles market. And in Zimbabwe, we found that there are a lot of reserves around lithium. So really we need to then come up with specific policies that then address that particular niche or that particular sector, to say that how can we then attract some of the car makers to come and set up shop within Zimbabwe. So really it's about the policies.
Indeed. Yeah. We must end it here only because we're out of time, but I want to thank you, Batanai, for coming through to the program.
Excellent. Thank you.
Fantastic, and I do thank you, viewers and everyone who's following us from wherever you're following us. This is the Rebound Series, and we encourage you to join us again for future programs. Once again, thank you to Batanai. Thank you to Doug Munatsi, my guest earlier in the program. We'll be back again to do this again. Be sure to join us then. It is the Rebound Series only on Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services.